Hello, you're watching a special Sky News programme in which we answer your questions about the coronavirus outbreak.
Well, as you're probably aware, COVID-19 now spread to some 100 countries, more than 114,000 people infected.
In the UK, the first strategy is to contain the virus, then to delay any potential outbreak until the summer, away from the winter pressures on the NHS.
Well, meanwhile, lots of research taking place into vaccines, as well as a plan to mitigate the risks of any outbreak to brace the health service as best we can.
Well, here to answer all your questions, we have a panel of experts. In our central London studio, we're joined by Rose Gallagher, who's a professional lead for infection prevention and control at the Royal College of Nursing. And we also have Anne-Sophie Harling, the managing director for Europe at NewsGuard. She's going to be talking about fake news.
Here in the studio, refusing to shake our hands, as all our guests are now doing, Rose Gallagher, former English teacher who now writes for the Times Education Supplement. Welcome to you as well.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to all of you for joining us. Rose Gallagher, let's start with you first of all. This is a question that's come from Sam on Twitter. And they say other countries are sanitising public spaces, especially public transport, to prevent coronavirus from further spreading. Meanwhile, the UK government just tells everyone to wash their hands. Should the government be doing more to contain the outbreak in terms of mass sanitisation?
Some of the images that you've seen in the media have come from countries that have far higher numbers of infections that we do currently. The government's advice to wash our hands, especially after using public transport, is absolutely right. There's no indication of us having to do that currently. So we would continue to encourage the public to use soap and water or alcohol hand gel if they have it, given our current number of infections that we have here in the UK.
So no mass spraying, as far as you're concerned, is necessary?
No, at the moment there is no indication of the need to do that.
OK, thanks, Rose.
Grania, this is the question that lots of parents are asking, obviously. At what point do we think about closing down schools? Why has it not happened yet, as it has done in several other countries we can think about, not least across the whole of Italy?
Now, one of the reasons they've given for not closing schools yet is because they don't want people to become fatigued, and that if we close them too early, we'll then find that people are desperate to get out, and then they're coming out of their houses and mixing at the times when really the...
Or if you're a health worker, suddenly you can't go to hospital because your child can't.
Well, there's that as well. So from a parent's perspective, if your child's school closes, how can the country function? We've got lots of nurses and policemen and people that need to be at work, and they can't be doing that if their children aren't in school. We don't know the official numbers of how many schools have closed at the moment, but we do know that Public Health England are saying remain open.
OK, next question. We'll put this one to Anne-Sophie. This is about fake news and also what's going on in all the different social media spheres as well. Kevin from St Leonard's, he says, I buy a lot on eBay from China. Can the virus travel in packets?
No, that's not the case. It's really important when getting information from social media that you don't rely on information that's coming directly from posts or screenshots, that you go directly to the credible sources that are being flagged by those social media organizations, and ones that you sort of know to be credible. Part of the problem is that all the false information and misinformation around coronavirus that we're seeing on these social media platforms really exposes our over-reliance on social media for information, and also exposes the social media companies' over-reliance on algorithms to solve these problems. So what we really need are people who can understand sort of what's motivating bad actors, what makes a source like the NHS or the World Health Organization credible, and what makes sort of agenda-driven news around coronavirus unsafe, and really to think and use common sense before sharing.
Because we heard from one of the passengers who's on a cruise ship that's been quarantined in America this morning, saying that she's been relying on what the captain told her because there's so much fake news around. She didn't want to believe anything at all she read in the papers. Now, is that a concern that actually this is leading to such a distrust of all journalism that people don't know where to look?
Yeah, I don't think that the misinformation that we're seeing on coronavirus is anything new. I think coronavirus has really brought it to the forefront of people's mind, and fake news is now once again sort of the hot topic. But the kinds of conspiracies, theories that we're seeing around coronavirus are constantly swirling around social media and really follow the pattern of different conspiracy theories that travel the web. So I think what's important to note is that the kinds of solutions that we put in place, and we're seeing lots of great things coming out of the government and the NHS working with those platforms, is that we also need to think about longer-term solutions in terms of increasing digital literacy among the UK population and beyond, and ensuring that the sources that are publishing news and information on these social media sites are being held accountable and are being sort of signposted and being held to certain criteria of transparency and credibility, so that users themselves can figure out sort of how to navigate the information space. It's not enough to have smart algorithms. We need smart internet users and humans too.
Okay.
Matt Hancock, Health Secretary, has been talking in the House of Commons today. It's the kind of question he might have got today, actually. Instead, we'll give it to Rose Gallagher, who's here. Rose, this question: why is the NHS not having doctors, especially GPs, wear protective clothing during consultations? The GP is the first point of contact for coronavirus patients. What's the answer to that question?
There is advice around when personal protective equipment, so that would be masks, gloves, potentially aprons, etc., is required. If our GP colleagues are in front of a patient that presents with potential symptoms of coronavirus, then they would take the necessary steps to wear that PPE. And Public Health England and NHS England and Improvement are working to make sure that our GPs have enough PPE should they require it in their consultations. So the current guidance is very clear on the indications for when we most need to wear PPE.
I just wonder, from the RCN's point of view, Rosie, what are the members feeding back? Is it too early to get a sense of how members feel about this, whether they feel that the government sufficiently got their back?
Our members have good access to information, so we as a Royal College have made sure that our members have access through our website. The messages that have been put out by Public Health England, the government, and actually the media around going to credible sources of information and following government advice have been really clear. So for our members in the main, the messages have got through about where to get information. Obviously, what can be challenging and what we recognise is that in this fast-moving situation, guidance such as our infection control guidance has to be updated and changed regularly. So we need to work a little bit harder at making sure that people have the most up-to-date information or know that the guidance has been changed in line with the evidence as it emerges.
OK.
Another education question, this one for you, Gráinne. Mike Wilson, a question that lots of people with teenagers will have on their mind about school exams is, if the schools in the UK do end up closing, what's going to happen to this year's GCSE and A-levels?
Now, of course, official line is keep revising. So that at the moment there's no plans to move the GCSEs or A-levels. If we find that the schools are closing and they're unable to go in and sit their exams, perhaps we might see the exams are sat later on in the summer, at the end of the summer term, and that students will be able to take their exams at that point.
Because at this time of year, most of the students will have studied everything up to now, won't they? They are now into that sort of revision zone, period, which they could do on their own at home.
And there's lots of things that they can do at home. We've seen it work successfully in Italy and in China, where you can do remote learning from home. There's plenty of resources on YouTube and other platforms where students can access the schoolwork and still continue to do their work at home.
Back to fake news, where it's coming from, how it can mislead or otherwise people. This is a question from Paresh. Anna-Sophie, let me read it to you. Does temperature have any impact on coronavirus? Can measures like sauna bath and steam bath be used for increasing the temperature and cure patients? I think we know the answer to that is an emphatic no, but just spell it out for us.
No, so this is a classic example of something that's been circulating and that people might be believing because they're seeing it posted on their friends or families' Facebook pages or on Twitter, or they might sort of have heard it from a friend down in the pub. This has been debunked on the NHS website and the WHO's website, and is really sort of testament to the fact that we should be going to those credible sort of information sources to figure out sort of what to believe. So I think again, I want to encourage everyone, before you decide to sort of tell a friend about something you may have heard about coronavirus, or believe that you might be safe as long as you're taking hot baths, remember to follow the advice that you're getting from official sources. And when you read anything online, sort of double check that it's coming from the correct sources. When in doubt, if you see a screenshot of a news article claiming something, go to that original source. The Manchester Evening News reported a couple of days ago that there were screenshots of a fake Manchester Evening News article circulating about coronavirus, and they've sort of had to publish information saying, don't believe everything that you see on the web, go straight to our website. And so I think, again, the temperature story is a really good example of something that I think a lot of people have heard and believe. But really, we should be following the advice of the government and credible sources.
Anna-Sophie, what is the motivation? When hogwash like this is peddled, what's the motivation behind the peddler?
Right, so I think with coronavirus misinformation in particular, what we're seeing is less so sort of disinformation by sort of foreign governments or sort of classic propaganda that we might be seeing from other topics. Instead, with coronavirus and with many other health hoaxes, it comes from bad actors who are looking to profit off of some of the fear that's surrounding coronavirus. So what you'll see is articles that are trending in the UK that might be advancing some sort of cure, and what this means is that those people are motivated by people believing those stories and then clicking buy this product because they're so afraid, and they think that if they drink this miracle cure, or perhaps even sort of drink bleach, that they might be curing or preventing coronavirus from coming. And we've seen this in France recently. The health ministry tweeted a message saying, FYI, cocaine doesn't prevent coronavirus, and even more concerning, in Iran, dozens of people have died from alcohol poisoning because of the common rumor that alcohol might prevent coronavirus. So really, it varies. I think the important thing for people to understand is that oftentimes the messages that they're seeing, those face masks that are advertised all over social media, those are coming from people who realize that everyone's looking for a cure and wants to be safe. And so these people are trying to profit off of that fear. I think once people understand that, they might be more vigilant and critical when they're sort of going around social media trying to find answers.
OK.
Well, let's return to the facts that we do know. Rose, from the Royal College of Nursing, Jeff has tweeted in and wants to know about how long it can live on surfaces, on hard surfaces. Say a lift button, an escalator handrail, a table in a coffee shop. How long can it survive there, assuming no one clears the surface?
Right, so what we know is that the virus can survive for a short period of time on surfaces. So if we assume that no one touches that surface again or cleans it, then approximately 5 days under the right conditions. Now, that being said, even though we can potentially identify the virus on those surfaces after that period of time, whether it's capable of going on to cause infection after that period of time, whether it's viable enough, of course, is another question. So just to be better safe than sorry, certainly within hospital environments, we're being really careful about making sure that the patient environment is cleaned regularly and that we use the right disinfectant at the right concentration that we know will destroy those viruses in those types of environments.
OK, Rose, thanks very much.
This is Sky News Today. Coming up, we'll be answering more of your questions, including one from Richard, who wants to know whether COVID-19 could become, at some stage, airborne.
Well, welcome back to our special programme on the coronavirus outbreak. We're answering your questions with our expert panel. In our central London studio, we're joined by Rose Gallagher, the Professional Lead for Infection Prevention and Control at the Royal College of Nursing. And here in the studio, we've got Gronya Hallahan, who writes for the Times Education Supplement, former English teacher. Thank you both very much.
Gronya, let's start with this one. Adrienne writes in to say, kids can bring COVID-19 home and spread it to their vulnerable parents and grandparents. Why can't those parents legally keep kids off school. It's an interesting point, isn't it? There's a legal obligation to send your kids to school, but what if you feel actually they're super spreaders and, Granny's in her 80s?
It's a really interesting point, especially because it's not just because of the grandparents at home we need to think about. Even if your child doesn't have any underlying health conditions, there will be children at that school who will have underlying health conditions that you need to think about. Not only that, you've got the staff
at school,
That's a very good example. And you've got the teachers of the school, and there's the whole staff, not just the teachers, but everybody who works in the school. You have to think about their safety. So this idea of children being more, although they won't necessarily can catch and come down to serious symptoms, they might carry the virus and then pass it on to others. It's a really interesting point, and it's something that parents have to think about. And if they've got serious concerns about their own child, they need to speak to the school. And lots of schools that I know of are compiling lists of students who are particularly vulnerable or come from families where their immune systems are compromised, and they need to compile lists of these students so that they're aware if there is a case, they can act quickly.
Okay.
Let's go back to Rose Gallagher from the Royal College of Nursing. Sarah has tweeted in to ask, if you catch COVID-19 and make a recovery, is there any permanent damage to your lungs?
That's a very good question. The evidence so far for people that recover well is that there is no long-lasting damage. Obviously, if you have a long-term respiratory condition, for example, it may be that you're left with some other symptoms for a while. We really need to be led by the evidence at this time. So the evidence from China, the evidence that we're gathering from Italy, as we learn more about the impact of this virus on populations. But for most people, we will become immune after we catch this virus, and we will go on to live normal, healthy lives afterwards.
Another question for Grania on what's happening in schools. This is, in a sense, below the top line. What are schools doing regarding hygiene? Have schools been instructed to do anything beyond that which they would normally do to keep the school clean?
I know lots of schools where they're encouraging their students not just to wash their hands, but to wash their hands for the correct length of time, and using songs to help teach their students to wash their hands properly. There's also material which you can get from the government website, helping students in key stages 1, 2 and 3 with hygiene rules, and trying to encourage our students to have the best hygiene possible.
Are they quite good at that, the primary school kids?
Oh, primary school kids, they do love to sneeze on you and to sneeze on each other and to lick each other. I've got small children, I'm forever telling them to stop licking each other. I think it's you're fighting a really tough battle on that one.
I was going to accuse you of lowering the tone, but you've been at the sharp end, you know whereof you speak.
Yeah, at our school they're banning homemade cakes. Because, a couple more of the fake news ones for Anne-Sophie. Billy says he's found on an NHS YouTube channel you can make your own hand sanitizer by mixing a tablespoon of Dettol to 500 mils of water. And Richard Page would also like to know, are we being told the truth? Could COVID-19 become airborne? Hand sanitizer, first of all, something that you'd be recommending?
No, and the official guidelines say that it can actually be quite dangerous to make your own hand sanitizer, so definitely don't do that. The fact-checking organization Full Fact has actually fact-checked this claim, and also whether Dettol can prevent the spread of coronavirus. So it's really important that when you go on YouTube, you're not clicking on accounts that are purporting to have sort of the cure or the claim. Again, use common sense. If there was a cure for coronavirus, I'm pretty sure the NHS would have told us about it. In the same way, sort of making your own cures or hand sanitizers can be quite dangerous. And again, I would really encourage everyone to go to those credible sources. Definitely don't make your own hand sanitizer.
And in terms of it is, could COVID-19 become airborne? That's another question. I mean, one of the themes of a lot of what we're seeing on social media and on fake news is this a lot worse than we are being told? Is the government hiding it? Is this one big conspiracy? Where should people go if they want to get an answer to that?
So I think if you want to avoid conspiracies, get off of social media. As we've seen, not just with coronavirus, but with many other important topics around politics or health or climate change, there are many groups and accounts on Twitter and Facebook that are spreading conspiracy theories that purport to tell the truth about sort of a big plot, maybe the government hiding something, whether it's sort of 5G radiation or something like coronavirus being engineered by a foreign government to keep population levels under control. These are the sorts of things that are swirling around social media, and I think they do speak to a larger problem about the social media's companies' over-reliance on algorithms taking down those sorts of content. And again, I think it's quite important that individual users sort of get the tools necessary and have the systems in place that allow them to differentiate between a YouTube account that might be peddling a certain product and a credible organization that might have what seems like boring common sense solutions, but are actually sort of the official lines on what we know and what we can safely encourage people to do to protect themselves.
OK, thanks, Anne-Sophie.
Quite tricky stopping teenagers peddling conspiracy theories. It's
Yes.
the most dramatic event, external event in their lives so far, isn't it, for many of them? Rose Gallagher, can we go back to the question of whether, after self-isolating, does the body make antibodies? I mean, actually, Rose, don't you make antibodies if you've had the infection before? What's the science on this?
So, as with other viruses such as influenza or the common cold, we know that after you've had the infection, that your body will naturally produce antibodies to that infection. So I would expect the same thing to happen with this particular type of coronavirus. So for most people, as I've said before, we should recover well. Some people will take longer to recover. Some people may need hospital support whilst they are unwell. But we should develop antibodies. Obviously, if you're older, that may take some time, or perhaps our immune systems aren't working so well. But for the majority of us, we'll become immune for at least a period of time, and therefore will remain protected after we've had the infection.
Rose, in a word, is it any good popping Bit C tablets right now, trying to boost your natural immune system?
Sorry, which C tablets?
Vitamin C tablets, that sort of thing.
Oh, vitamin C tablets. I mean, a good healthy diet really is what we would advise people to have. Vitamin supplements have their place, but we don't want for people to rely on those. So a normal healthy diet, plenty of fruit and vegetables, fresh air.
Oh, all that stuff. Rose, thanks very much indeed. Thanks.
Rose Gallagher, Anne-Sophie Harling and Gráinne Hallahan, thank you all very much for joining us.